Yuta vs Kenjaku is a matchup that has been heavily anticipated throughout Jujutsu Kaisen. Yuta is a special grade sorcerer who has been hyped up as having an endless amount of curse energy, and Kenjaku is the bad guy who was able to beat another special grade sorcerer, that being Yuki. I ran a poll on the channel asking who you guys thought would win the fight and why, and the poll was overwhelmingly in Kenjaku's favor, which is correct. We know that Yuta swore he would kill Kenjaku, so we know the fight is bound to happen sometime or another, but unfortunately for Yuta, this fight is not close. There is a reason Maki stated that nobody currently can beat Kenjaku, not even Yuta or herself. But in order for you to fully understand, I should fully explain why Kenjaku vs Yuta is not close. First, I want to say if you enjoy JJK content, then please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as I upload videos every couple of days on different topics you guys recommend me and a few I come up with on my own. Now let's get into the versus battle. First, we should cover Yuta's abilities and his fighting style. We learned back from Volume 0 that Yuta does not have a strong physical body. He had to learn how to control cursed energy in order to protect his body. In this volume, we learned about Rika, a cursed spirit of endless cursed energy that protects Yuta at all times. Because of Rika, Yuta was given the classification of special grade. Back then, when Maki and Yuta go to a school to exercise curses, they find themselves trapped in the stomach of a curse. Without enough physical strength to fight their way out, they seem in a helpless position. And after freaking out for a bit, Yuta calms himself and puts a ring on his finger that summons Rika, and she exorcises the curse that was trapping them. We learned here that the application of the ring fully manifests Rika to join a battle and help protect Yuta. When back at the school, Gojo says that exercising a curse as powerful as Rika is nearly impossible. Now keep in mind, nearly impossible does not mean impossible. Gojo is just saying there is a level of strength that is needed to take down Rika, and this level of strength is very rare or hard to come by. We know this because Rika is just a cursed spirit at the end of the day. Gojo himself has attacks like Purple that should be able to exercise Rika, and any other cursed energy or positive energy attacks that are strong enough should be enough to exercise Rika. The main point here is that to be able to exercise her, you just need to be as strong or stronger than she is, or at least have an attack that is strong enough to damage her, and we see that this is possible further in the series, but I'll get into that a bit later. Gojo tells Yuta that he needs to learn how to channel the power of Rika, and we see Gojo say, "A curse is most stable when possessing an item. Your connection to Rika came about through a ring. Think of it like a pipe that is already there. Invoke the curse of Rika, channel it into the katana and control it. Then repeat that process, increase the energy and master it." Gojo then tells him, hey, by the way, you are super weak, so go train with Maki, which is the truth by this point, and we see it stay consistent later in the series. Yuta's physical body is weak. He isn't built like Todo or Yuji or anything, so he doesn't have the same base toughness as those guys. He instead supports his toughness with cursed energy. Skipping forward to his fight with Geto, we see he immediately starts off the fight with cursed speech, a technique that he copied from Inumaki, and he was also able to use himself. After being impressed, we see Geto say that Rika's true identity is to be a cursed spirit of endless cursed energy, and this makes him even more excited. We see Yuta dash towards Geto and they get into an up-close fight. After blocking a couple of his attacks, Geto gives him a bit of a philosophical talk, and then he summons a curse on the ground to distract him, then punches him away. After getting angrier, Yuta dashes back towards Geto, and Geto even says that Yuta has gotten much faster. Yuta tries to swing his sword at Geto, but it breaks because he put too much curse energy into the sword. Then Yuta punches Geto so hard that he gets sent flying backwards. After getting up, Geto says that he will put all of his curses into one and shoot it at Yuta, this attack being named the Maximum Uzumaki. Now, Yuta does sort of seduce Rika here. He promises her everything if she can help him defeat Geto, and we see Rika goes into her awakened state and she gets stronger. By the way, awakened Rika is just the form of Rika with her eye out. She goes into this state whenever she is either extremely mad or extremely in love, like we see here. And Geto even says that Yuta has sacrificed himself in order to surpass the limits of cursed energy. And after this, Geto and Yuta combine blast, and Geto loses. Now, we do know that Geto should have actually won this fight. We see Kenjaku say later in the series that if Geto's cursed spirits had not been split, Geto would have won the fight. The main takeaway from the fight with Geto is that Yuta has the ability to copy others' curse techniques. He is also able to calm himself within a difficult battle, and once he is calm, he is able to move faster than he was able to before. The next time we see Yuta in action isn't until around chapter 139 when Yuji and Choso come across Nelia. After pulling up, Yuji says, "Is this Gojo? No, it's something even creepier." After he and Yuji begin to fight, Yuta says, "I don't look like the power type, I'm actually on the weaker side," and Yuji says that Yuta is the exact opposite of him. Yuta says that he has even more cursed energy than Gojo, but he can actually run out of cursed energy unlike Gojo. After clashing with Yuji a bit more, Rika comes from nowhere and holds Yuji in place. Rika is so strong that Yuji says he can't move an inch, but this isn't too impressive as we know there are people who are physically on Rika's level, and I will get into the fight where we see this. Let's get into what happened between Yuta, Ryu, and Uro. We'll only look at the half of the fight where he has Rika since that is what's most important for this battle. After summoning Rika, Yuta's curse energy begins to well up again, and then we learn what he can do with this new Rika. Rika is the external storage for curse energy and curse techniques. Only when he's connected through the ring can he use curse techniques, fully manifest Rika, and obtain Rika's curse energy for himself. We also see now that Yuta no longer needs the megaphone to use curse speech. With the markings on his face and tongue, he is able to just use the technique with his voice and his hand alone. While distracted, Rika comes up and punches Ryu in the face and sends him flying. But after getting back up, Ryu is able to send Rika flying through a rooftop with a single punch. They get into a three-way domain clash, but it is broken up by the cockroach, and then Ryu just blasts away Uro, and Yuta blasts away the cockroach, leaving Yuta and Ryu in a one-on-one. Before the blast clash, it says, Yuta can only release a directed high output blast of curse energy while Rika is fully manifested, but even at full power, it is still slightly weaker than Ishigori's blast. Ryu goes on to win the blast battle, and in hindsight, it shouldn't really be that crazy to see, because we already knew by this point that Ryu had the highest curse energy output. But even then, this was a blast from Awakened Rika. And by the way, Awakened Rika is the form of Rika where her eye is open. It's the same form she went into in Volume 0 back when Yuta confessed his love for her and they let out that strong blast to beat Geto. This Awakened Rika lost a blast battle to Ryu. Back to the fight, we see Yuta dashes forward towards Ryu and Rika lets out a blast of her own, but Ryu just catches the blast and says that wasn't very powerful. And after shooting a final granite blast at Yuta, Yuta bends the blast towards the sky. And while Ryu is trying to figure out what's going on, he assumes that Yuta's copy ability has a major condition, and that the condition was met when Rika bit Uro's arm. After punching Ryu in the stomach with a thin icebreaker, and Ryu getting punched in the head by Rika, Ryu is actually able to get back and punch Rika so hard that she completely gets hit out of her full manifestation. We know the fight ended with a blast that Yuta bended earlier coming down from the sky, and sadly that is how the fight ends. Now that we have covered all of the major fighting points in Yuta's career, here's what is the most important. Geto would have beaten Yuta a year ago had he had all of his forces. Rika is very strong but can be tossed around by Ryu, and Ryu can catch a blast of hers and says that it is weak. Yuta so far has Uro Skybending Technique, Curse Speech, and Drew Shikigami, and anytime Yuta gets low on Curse Energy, his bet is to fully manifest Rika so she can give him not only just Curse Energy, but Curse Technique usage as well. Yuta reinforces himself with Curse Energy because his physical body is actually pretty weak. And now that all of Yuta's abilities, his fighting style, and his feats have been covered, let's get into why Kenjaku Slams. Remember back in Shibuya when Gojo was being sealed and Kenjaku basically said that Yuta was nothing special? Yeah, there was a reason for that. We didn't know why then, but we know why now. And also there's a reason why Maki basically said nobody currently can beat Kenjaku, not even Yuta or herself. But in order for you to understand completely, let's get into Kenjaku's feats. The first fight we can cover is the most important fight, and that is the fight between Choso and Yuki. I will quickly go over the Choso fight as Choso is the weakest opponent there, so his moments aren't too important. Choso tries to hit Kenjaku with piercing blood, but Kenjaku can just weave it with ease. And Choso even tries to catch Kenjaku off guard with a supernova, but Kenjaku reacts in time to summon a curse at his side and block the attack. We see this punch Kenjaku lands on Choso that is so hard, it completely turns his body around. And if you notice, that is the back of Choso's foot we are seeing right there, so this punch hurt him badly. While he has Choso pinned on the ground, Kenjaku says that he has been manipulating low-level curses because Choso is so weak, and then he tells Choso that he is on the level of a grade 1 sorcerer. After thinking about his brothers, Choso gets this sort of amp that we haven't seen before, where he is fighting in his three brothers form. Even this form is ineffective though, as Kenjaku can just react to all of his attacks. The most important part of this fight is the end. At the end, Choso catches Kenjaku off guard with a few supernovas, and instead of having enough time to summon curses, Kenjaku reveals a curse technique that he has been keeping secret the entire story. He uses gravity to send the supernovas to the ground so they do not hit him. After this happens, Choso leaves the battlefield and we see Yuki step in. Kenjaku summons a special grade curse in order to fill Yuki out and see how strong she is. Yuki summons Garuda, which is a curse tool, and applies mass to it, and after she kicks Garuda towards the special grade curse, it completely blows right through it. Then Yuki runs up on Kenjaku, applies mass to herself, and breaks both of his arms completely. Now right now you might be thinking, wow, Kenjaku is getting done dirty. And for this first part of the fight, yeah, he was, but it was on purpose. He was just gauging Yuki's technique in order to know how to approach the fight. And after he gets the download on her, we see him adjust. We see Yuki try to break down how to fight Kenjaku in her head, but Kenjaku basically says, yeah, screw all of the plans, I'm just going to open my domain. Which is like a game ender for Yuki because Tengen warned Choso and Yuki beforehand that Kenjaku is one of the few people in the world who can match him in barrier techniques. And we know domains are barrier techniques, so Yuki getting in a domain clash with Kenjaku would just be certain defeat. Tengen and Yuki had this entire plan where Tengen would destroy the outer shell of Kenjaku's domain, but they miscalculated. This is because Kenjaku's domain doesn't actually have a shell. Tengen says it's an amazing feat in which he opens his domain and activated a technique without closing a barrier. Yuki tries to open a simple domain, but it gets ripped apart, and Kenjaku even says, "Do you think that technique can withstand my domain?" Kenjaku hits Yuki with just one sure hit inside his domain with the gravity technique, and it messes Yuki up badly. We see her lying on the ground with a mangled arm. We see Yuki tries to pull a sneak attack by distracting Kenjaku with Garuda, but Kenjaku just reacts and then blocks her oncoming kick. After a failed onslaught, Yuki grabs Garuda and wraps him around Kenjaku, and we see Choso comes back in to join the fight with a piercing blood, and he's about to hit Kenjaku from behind. Choso releases the piercing blood at Kenjaku's head, but he just rotates the top of his head with the blood in order to slip the hit. The manga even says it is similar to a boxer slipping a punch. Yuki and Choso go on to try and bombard Kenjaku with physical attacks, but he is actually able to maneuver himself around the hits in order to block all of them. Yuki takes a step back in order to use reverse curse technique and heal her damaged arm. She throws Garuda towards Kenjaku from one side, and Choso starts charging Kenjaku from the other side, and as it looks like Kenjaku is about to be hit, he replenishes his curse technique and smushes both of them to the ground. This is where Yuki breaks down that Kenjaku's gravity technique lasts in intervals of 6 seconds, and crushes everything within a radius from 2 to 3 meters from him. Yuki comes in to close the gap during the interval, and she says to herself, reverse curse technique in the domain wore away at his curse energy, and fighting Big Brother tired him out physically. Gravity isn't unyielding as I thought it was at first. Given the effect of range, I can narrowly escape even at close range. And Yuki thinks that she has it all figured out, you know, she just closed the gap and thinks that Kenjaku is in a weak state. But after doing all of these calculations, Kenjaku just grabs Yuki's arm and shoots a tiny Uzumaki blast at her face, burning it. And then Kenjaku says to Yuki that even though her mass increases, her durability doesn't, and then he hits her with a tiny Uzumaki to the stomach, which blows a hole through Yuki completely. Yuki realizes at this point that she messed up, and she says, he wasn't biding time for a gravity technique, it was to distract me from the small Uzumaki, leaving me no time to regenerate. And after this, Kenjaku slams Yuki to the ground and splits her completely in half. And at this point, it seems like everything is over and the battle is finished. But Yuki grabs Kenjaku's ankle and creates a mass so heavy that she creates a black hole, and she tries to catch Kenjaku in it along with herself. But even after being hit with a black hole, Kenjaku survives. Tengen asks how he was able to survive, and Kenjaku says that he used an anti-gravity technique in order to counteract the black hole. And after this happens, Kenjaku walks up to Tengen and takes him. The main takeaways from this fight were a couple of things. One, Kenjaku is one of the few people who can match Tengen in barrier techniques, and his domain has no outer shell. Remember how Sukuna's domain was called divine for having no outer shell? It seems like domains with no shells are supposed to be the highest of the top tier. And second, Kenjaku has insane physical abilities. He was able to weave and counteract literally every single attack during the Choso fight, and then after he found out what Yuki's technique was, he was able to weave and counterattack every hit there as well. Third, just one hit from the sure hit within Kenjaku's domain was enough to lay Yuki out completely, and she mangled her arm. And the only reason it didn't get worse is because Tengen deactivated the domains in the area. 4. Kenjaku can create tiny Uzumaki blasts that are strong enough to go through Yuki with ease, and he was able to summon 2 of these Uzumakis after activating Reverse Curse Technique and El Domain, so his stamina is literally the best we have seen so far. It's like the guy doesn't lose a step. And lastly, his gravity technique is completely busted, so anything within a 2 to 3 meter radius from him gets laid out for 6 seconds, and he can attack in between the intervals. This is why when Maki came back and reported the news of what happened to Yuki, she says, "We already knew it, but this serves as further confirmation that we can't defeat Kenjaku through conventional means." So now that both of their abilities are covered, let's go over how the outcome of this fight would probably go. Let's talk about 2 possible scenarios. Scenario number 1 is Kenjaku opens his domain out the gate, which is actually the likely scenario, as once he saw how dangerous Yuki was, he went for the immediate domain expansion. And this is a good plan for Kenjaku, as Yuta would be in a vulnerable state and Kenjaku's sure hit seemed to do a lot of damage, as just one sure hit was able to lay Yuki out and mangle her arm. Also, it is extremely likely that Yuta would lose in a domain clash to Kenjaku, and this is because of a couple of things. 1. Kenjaku is stated by Tengen to be one of the only people in the world who can match him in barrier techniques, and this was before Tengen found out Kenjaku's domain had no outer shell. After Tengen found out Kenjaku's domain had no shell, he called Kenjaku's domain divine, so the odds of Yuta having a domain on this level are near 0. Yes, it is possible because Yuta himself is very strong, but we're talking about a shellless domain that was divine in comparison to Tengen, who was the most powerful barrier user they knew of. And after Kenjaku gets his domain up, a couple of sure hits should be enough to mangle Yuta pretty badly. This outcome is probably why Maki said nobody can beat Kenjaku currently. Now that that outcome is covered, let's get into outcome number 2. I want to say that this outcome I do not think is likely, but let's just cover it anyways. Let's say for some reason Kenjaku doesn't want to open a domain and just wants to fight Yuta up close. This makes Yuta's odds significantly higher of winning than the previous outcome, and this actually might be a close fight under this scenario, because there would be no domain to make Yuta vulnerable, so he would be able to fight and use his different techniques, and he would have some assistance from Rika in hand-to-hand fights. The only problem would arise when Kenjaku would start firing mini Uzumakis at both Yuta and Rika. We don't know for sure how strong these mini Uzumakis are, as we know they were just enough to go through Yuki, who was weak at the time, but I will let you guys decide whether or not you think the mini Uzumakis would damage Yuta and Rika, and if so, then how much damage do you think it would do to them? Yuta would also have trouble with the gravity technique as well. Her speech doesn't work on high level sorcerers because they are trained to cover their ears with curse energy, so Yuta's physical attacks would be getting nulled by the gravity technique. So in this scenario number 2 where Kenjaku doesn't open domain, Yuta's chances go up significantly, but Kenjaku still probably has enough strong techniques like gravity and tiny Uzumakis, as well as his amazing physical combat, to where Yuta would still probably lose here as well. But like I said earlier, this outcome isn't likely anyway, as Kenjaku would definitely fight like scenario number 1, where he just opens the domain and beats Yuta up. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I post videos every couple days on different topics you guys recommend me and a few I come up with on my own. Also, since we will probably see this fight in the near future, let me know how you guys think this fight will go down, and if you have another versus battle for me to cover, let me know which ones to do. Thank you for watching, see you next time.